Trading futures and options on futures involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all traders and investors. Oftentimes in futures trading, you have a high combination of leverage and volatility. And although this could be an equation for opportunity, it's also an equation for risk. So be careful. Only fund your futures trading account with risk capital. My personal definition of risk capital is money I could afford to lose, doesn't change my lifestyle, or overly stress me out. As human beings, we make bad decisions when we're under stress, so be in a good spot. Remember, micro contracts could be friends. Take it easy on the day trade margins. You get plenty of leverage without maxing out on those day trade margins on a regular basis. We'll be taking a look at a real-time simulated live NinjaTrader trading platform today, and none of this should be construed as trade or investment advice. Past performance not indicative of future results.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning even to NinjaTrader's Platform Unleashed. Today I will be hosting the show. Jim Cagnina is taking a much-needed day off, and we are going to be talking about the drawing tools. So NinjaTrader's Platforms Unleashed, we do a little bit of a deeper dive into the ins and outs of the platform, and today is no different. Before we get started, though, I do want to thank, as usual, Ed Jerkin for joining the chat. Now, Ed will be monitoring the chat. He can pretty much answer any question. I can say pretty confidently he'll have an answer for any question you can throw in the chat. Where is the chat? Well, it's at ninjatrader.com/events. That's ninjatrader.com/events. You can join the chat, hit the play button, put your name in. And if there's something on this show that you see that sparks a question, or if you have a comment, put it in the chat, and Ed will make sure that I see that. We have a communications device here that lets us interact with you and me. So with that, getting started, let's talk about drawing tools. Now, drawing tools is something that is such a great addition to charts because it allows you, the user, to interact with something that might catch your eye or something you want to remember about the chart that you see on the screen. Where do we see them? Well, the quickest way that I can see is this pencil right up here, top left of your toolbar is a pencil. And you'll see if you hover over it, it says drawing tool. There are many different types of drawing tools. You'll see a couple of features here, snap mode. We'll talk about snap mode. We have different kind of really interesting measuring tools here. We've got some lines here. We'll go through most of these tools as we go. Fibonacci specific tools. So Fibonacci being a way to segment a measurement. We have those tools here. We have some other specialty tools, I would say, that have very specific purposes that are kind of separated from other tools. We have shapes down here, and we'll pretty much finish there. We have some ways of identifying a bar specifically down here. But let's get started with a general line. So when I look at a chart, I might want to see where a level, right? My eyes might get drawn to a level, or some people that I follow, they'll automatically put in the high and the low of the chart. So to do that, we're going to hit that pencil button and select horizontal line. Now you'll notice over here on the right, there are a bunch of keys. They're either function keys or control function or even alt function. Those are just the extra button you would have to push while you hit that function key. That can also bring up the tool quicker. So we'll just use this menu going forward, and then eventually you might switch to those hotkeys if you're familiar with your keyboard. So horizontal line is very simple. Now that I've clicked on horizontal line, you'll notice my cursor has turned into a pencil. It tells me that a drawing tool is enabled, the one that I selected. So what I'm going to do with my crosshairs on, I'm going to just hit the top of this bar, and that's the high of that bar, and it puts a drawing tool right there. And I can do this again, hit horizontal line, go to the low, and it brings up the low of the chart, just by hitting that horizontal line. Now it's not perfect, right? It's my eyeball doing this. If I move it a little bit above or a little bit below that high, I can always edit this. So let's say I want to make it precise. You can move your mouse over to the bar and see what is the, I want to see what the high of the bar is. And in this case, it's 46.8375. So I can double click on the horizontal line and I can actually enter that 46.8375 if I want to be exact on the number. Notice here I can also change the color. So I like to put red lines on top because red is, to me, bearish. It's resistance if it's on top. And I can make it also dashed. I can make it thicker. I can make it thinner, whatever I want to do, and I can hit apply. Now, if that's a style that I want to use for every horizontal line, I don't want to have to keep redoing it. Maybe I don't care about the color, so to speak, as if it's above or below price. But maybe I just want to make it a red dashed line with a width of 3. Every time I draw a horizontal line, I can click on template and then save that. And then I could say, well, we'll call this red dash. And we can save it, or we can save it as the default, which is really what we want to do if we want to use it every time. And so now let's hit cancel. Let's hit OK, rather. Sorry. We're going to delete this line again. And I'll use my hotkey F6 to bring up that horizontal line cursor. And now when I click here, notice it's a red dashed, thicker horizontal line because I saved that template and I made it by default. So that's pretty easy, pretty simple. Horizontal line, no big deal. What if I want to identify a trend line, right? I'm going to pull out my view. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and we can certainly see different trends happening, right? The most obvious trend to me is this uptrend, and it's fairly steep. But maybe I still want to notice that. I want to point out that trend line. So what I can do is, instead of using a horizontal line, of course, horizontal wouldn't help me here. I can use what we call a ray. Now, a ray is a line that is drawn to infinity from the first to the second point, which is perfect for what we're trying to do. Now, I'm going to use this, again, pencil icon, click the low, and this time we could use the low here, although it's been invalidated, I should say. Let's just use this low here to prove a point. And now this ray, no matter how far I go into the future, I'm going to shrink this up a little bit, it keeps going. Now, how do I know that a ray does that aside if I didn't know what a ray was, right? Well, when I go on to the drawing tool menu, you'll see, it's hard to see on my screen, but if you're following along at home, you can see this on your screen. There's a dot at the left end and an arrowhead on the right. That means this dot doesn't go past the dot on the left, but it points to the future. So I like to use rays when I'm identifying trends going into the future. If it's a current trend line, I use the ray. Otherwise, I would use what's known as a line, just a plain old line. 2 points. So if I saw let's say a resistance level from here to here, I might use a line because it ends, right? It's finite. So a line is finite, a ray is not, and I like to use rays for current trends. Let's see what else is there. The arrow line. Well, the arrow line works similarly. It's kind of a cross between a ray and a line in the sense that it acts like a line, but it has an arrowhead at the end of its second click. Now, a couple ways I use it. One is to point something out. Like, let's say I wanted to point out this recent high. I'm going to click here and click there. There it is. I'm pointing to the high. I also use it for measured moves. Maybe you see me do that on one of the regular shows, but I will, if I want to measure a move, we'll pretend I want to measure this candle move and add it to the end for whatever reason. I probably would never do that in real life. But if I take this arrow line and I go low to high, then I might copy it. Now, you can highlight the object and hit Control C on your keyboard. Control C, just like everything else, right? And then I can hit Control V. It'll make a replica. Watch this area because it'll double up. It just slightly moved down, and I can grab that. It leaves the original one there, and I can put it wherever I want. So for measured moves, I like arrows because it just kind of points to the level where I might want to be. Let's take a look at path. Now, there are some vertical lines here. You'll see vertical line. I don't generally use that. It obscures, for me, it obscures the data, right? So if I put a vertical line on a bar, I don't really know where the high and low is. I actually have to interact with that, which is what I'm trying to avoid when I'm putting these lines on, right? I just want the picture. I don't want to have to really interact too much. If a line obscures my view, then I might not look at it. Now, you might not care about that at all. Well, in which case, you can certainly put up a vertical line. You just click where you want, and it puts up a vertical line where, and notice that it runs through the entire height of the chart. So if I scrunch this up, we'll have a line on that bar, no matter how much data we show. So that's a vertical line. I'm going to get rid of that. And you can get rid of a single drawing tool annotation just by highlighting it, clicking on it, hit delete on your keyboard. That might be the quickest way to do it. You can also right click and remove, and that'll get rid of it as well. So I mentioned path. Let's get rid of some of these tools. Now, you can get rid of all of your tools, drawing tools, if you want, just by clicking on the pencil icon as well. And all the way at the bottom, it says remove all drawing objects. The nice thing about this is you will get a warning because it's going to take everything off this chart. You say yes, and now I'm back to this, just the blank chart with the data. But let's say I want to measure, I see this kind of wave action happening. I want to kind of highlight that with a drawing tool. We can use path. It's a great thing. I can go click on the high here and click on the low here. Now I keep clicking. I keep going. Click on the high here. Click on the low here. Click on the high here. Click on the low. And if I wanted to terminate it there, I double click. And now I've got my wave formation marked here. This is a great tool. It prevents me, or it allows me not to have to create multiple lines, right? This is 5 waves or five lines. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yeah, my eyes aren't deceiving me. That's 5 lines. So instead of having to click once, twice, and then 3 times, 4 times, a total of 10 times, I can just click at every high point and low point and then double click to finish it off. So it's much more efficient, and it might really get to where you want to go in terms of meeting up those vertices, those corner points. So I like the path. It's a great tool. And I can again highlight and delete. Now let's talk about some of the more well, let's talk about the shapes. So you might have seen our shows where Jim has highlighted areas of support and resistance with a rectangle. And the rectangle is Control F12. If that's something you want to use a lot, you might memorize the keyboard shortcut. But if I click on rectangle and I see an area that I want to highlight, it's as simple as envisioning that rectangle, and it's 2 clicks. 1 click to set one corner, and the second click will set the opposite corner, not on the same plane as either side. And so once it's set, I can move it around. I can grab one of the corners and I can elongate it or make it taller, make it shorter, whatever I want to do. I can adjust it and just click it again to set it. Some people use rectangles to identify areas of consolidation. So instead of making it a resistance or support concept, I might want to identify an area of congestion. So you can use rectangles any way you want. It's a drawing tool. This is your canvas. But common ways, I like the way Jim uses them for support and resistance, because it allows us to determine the height of the rectangle based on the widths of the wicks or the size of the wicks. And then the consolidation I like just because you can fit everything if you want in the candle, or maybe you just use the bodies of the candles as guides, but it's fairly flexible and it's entirely up to you. That's the great thing about drawing tools. You are setting the rules for drawing these tools. There's nothing calculated about it other than where you move your mouse. So those are rectangles. Now we have some other shapes. Let's look at an ellipse. An ellipse is a great place or a great shape to put in place where an event happens. Actually, what we're going to do before that is we're going to add an indication. Oh, it's not what I wanted to do. I want to right click and go to indicators. And we'll add a moving average. We'll add the 50. So I already have it added. I just have to make it visible. And let's say you wanted to add an ellipse every time it crossed above or crossed below the price, or price rather crossed above or below the moving average. So you can highlight by just going to ellipse and drawing it so that the center happens where the cross might occur. Now, if it's off, I might look at this area right here, say this is where the cross above really occurred. Yeah, it came back down, but this is where it first crossed. I want to highlight that. So you draw the ellipse. It takes a little bit of getting used to how it's drawn, because we're using 4 points to create that circle. And it's really not even a circle, it's an ellipse. So it could be wider than it's taller, it could be taller than it's wider. But you just kind of have to figure out, okay, what size do you want it? Maybe that's too small, you redraw it. But we can also control the colors and the style, just like we did our horizontal line. In fact, I'll double click. We can choose the color not only of the inside area, but we can choose the color of the outline. We can choose the style. I have a dot. We can make it a dash. The opacity of the outline, yeah, I'm going to leave it at 100, but the opacity of the filled in color is I'm going to make it a little less so it's not as stark. Because sometimes what happens is you make it too opaque and you can't really see the body, the candle, the wick, whatever it is. And so now I just made that, look over here, I've got a kind of a darker red filling in. Here's a lighter red filling in this one because I changed the opacity. So you have a little bit of control over how these shapes look, just like you do with the trend lines. Now, one thing I skipped because it was in a different section when we were talking about trends, and it's okay, we can come back to it, is a trend channel. So trend lines, the way I look at them is this. If you're in an uptrend, you want to mark the bottom part of that trend. Let's look at the ray. I want to look at the bottom part of this trend. And we'll use these two lows here. Very steep, but we can make it a little shallower, right? We can make it look the way we want. Because I want to know when this trend line is broken. If I'm in an uptrend, I don't really care if it continues to go up. I'm interested in when the trend changes. That's what I'm interested with the trend lines. So trend line on a bullish trend is going to be generally below the price. And if I'm in a downtrend, let's take a look at a previous downtrend. Here's a high here, here's a high here. I want to know when that trend line is breached, meaning it's no longer in a downtrend, but we're in an uptrend. So I put that trend line on top of the data when we're in a downtrend. But what happens if you're in a trend and it just doesn't change? You don't get breached, right? Sometimes we have trends that last quite a long time. So what you can do, and I'm going to get rid of these trend lines. Yes, we'll remove all drawing objects. And let me also hide the moving average because I want to make sure you see this. We're going to make that invisible. So I see this, it's somewhat of a trend channel here. Trend channel right here is control 2, and trend channel has 2 lines. So control 2 is kind of easy to remember. But the way I look at it is this. I'm going to mark the dominant trend line. So the dominant trend line to me is the highs, the one on top, right? So we'll just do this. We'll use this high to this high. And we'll go like this. It's not going to be perfect, but you can fix this how you want. Now, when I click that second click, it draws a parallel line. Now, why is that important? Well, what I'm using the trend channel for is to say, okay, I'm in a downtrend, but it seems like at some point during this downtrend, there's support and it rallies. And then it continues its downward trend and it hits support and it rallies. So it's somewhat range bound, but it's not a range that's identified by horizontal lines. It's a range identified by slightly declining lines, right? You could do the same on an uptrend. You can have an uptrend where it seems like it's bouncing between 2 lines, and then I just want to know when it breaks out. So here, this first trend line here is the one that actually, in a downtrend, you're in a downtrend channel, it breaks up, and now we've got a new paradigm, so to speak. But a trend channel is really drawn by using, I kind of cheated on this one, but really what you want to do is you want to use 2 highs and then the lowest low between those 2 highs as where you put the parallel line. In an uptrend, let's see if we can find a nice uptrend that lasted. Okay, well, here's one. This is a good one. And let me move this up a little bit. And we'll use the trend channel again. I'll use the exact low here. That's fine. You don't have to. But I'm going to use this second low as my guide. And put the highest high would be right here. So I'm going to just kind of move it so that there we go. So it's 2 lows. And then the highest high between those 2 lows kind of defines your trend channel. Now, it doesn't always follow through. That's fine. But that's what I'm trying to identify to see if this uptrend is really an uptrend, and if it is, where I might expect to find resistance. So let's go back. Let's hide those or remove those drawing objects. Let's go back to the current data right there. Here we go. So we're looking at a daily E-mini ES, and let's say you want to measure this retracement. Well, the key word here is retracement, and I want to measure it in terms of the previous downward move. And we want to break up that move into different levels. How do we do it? Fibonacci retracements. So if I'm going to turn it back on my crosshairs. We're going to go here to the high, here to the low. And that will mark the vertical distance from the high to the low into Fibonacci levels. And you see that 0%, 23, 38, 50, 61, 76, and 100. Now, what's interesting is we clicked here first, and then we clicked at the bottom. Our movement of clicking was down. So why is it marked the other way? Why is it ascending? Well, because we want to know what percent are we retraced of the previous move, and we measure in the same direction as the previous move. So if we're in an uptrend, we look at the previous downtrend, and we mark it top to bottom. If we were in an uptrend, a downtrend, and we had a previous uptrend, we would mark from bottom to top. Now let's get rid of this. We're going to square this up a little bit. And let's say we want to see how this might extend. We want to see, based on the previous uptrend, where could this extend to? Now, there's a tool called Fibonacci extension. And what we're looking at is, okay, we're in an uptrend. Let's look at the previous uptrend. And it's there to there. And what do we do now? We've got this thing following our mouse. Well, the chart doesn't know where we want to put it, right? All we did was measure the previous uptrend. We want to put it at the bottom of the current uptrend. So we'll just mark it. You could either put it right here or put it anywhere on the chart as long as your horizontal cursor is hitting the bottom. So we'll try to line it up this way. So look at that. We're about 61% of the way up of the previous uptrend. We've gone about 61% of the way up. If we were to continue this trend and move as much as we did the previous uptrend, that gives us a target up here at the 100% level. But it's interesting to see where we might find some resistance, some consolidation. Look, we're consolidating right at that 61.8% retracement level. If this market were to turn down, we might look at 50% as a target. If it breaks through, then we're looking at 76 as a target, which is right around here, right at the top of July's high, right near July's high. So this is just another tool that traders can use to see where we might go and where we might find some support or resistance. You can certainly do the same thing on the downtrend. You would just move in the direction of the downtrend, and then click that third click where the top of that downtrend is. Let's get rid of this. Hit delete on my keyboard. Now, going back to some of these other tools, I want to show you some cool ones that are really about prices, which is region highlight X and Y. Now, region highlight X is more about time. What that allows me to do is say, okay, from August to October, I want to isolate that chart to see what it did. It's just putting a highlight on, but it puts up a vertical line where you click first and a vertical line where you put second and fills it in. Some people use this for recession markers. Often you'll see that on charts where there's long-term charts. You'll see areas where there are these two vertical lines with a dark coloring or something. That's recession. Okay. You can do it for your own reasons. What I like is the region highlight Y. So if I see an area where there might be resistance and it's truly an area, not a very specific level, well, I can just click in the chart and identify that level. So we might find some resistance here and experience a lot of time in here, or we might not even get up there. But if we do, maybe we shoot through, whatever the narrative is, you can use this tool to highlight a range that you are interested in. Those are both really cool tools, and they're called region highlights, X and Y, X being the time axis and Y being the price axis. Another tool that I like is the ruler. Simply put, it just measures the distance between 2 points. So if I click on this low to this point out in the future, doesn't really matter that there's no price there. It'll tell me how many bars. So that's 26 bars. Doesn't tell me the date because it doesn't know the date yet, but it's 26 bars. It's 48 days. And the Y value is 404 handles, really, 404.25. So the distance from here to here is 405. It's a great measuring tool. If you want to see, oh, if you caught the top here and the bottom here, or you caught this, the open of this candle to the close of this candle. You can do the math by clicking on that candle, finding the open, then going here, finding the close, whatever it is. Or you could just take this ruler. You could say, okay, well, here's the open and here's the close. And that is down 133 points. So it knows direction, it knows how many bars, it knows the price. It's a great tool. And that is, again, called the ruler. Here's a fun one. I'm going to show you a little bit more advanced, but it's called Andrew's Pitchfork. And Andrew's Pitchfork looks at a move. We're going to use this downtrend, and it looks at possible paths, possible trends. So what it does is, let's say you take a high point and you say, I see this uptrend. I want to use the low here and the high here. And if this downtrend is, stays intact, I've got a range. It's like drawing a trend channel, but instead of using highs and lows of the actual trend lines, it uses kind of this first leg down, first rally, and then figures out a trend channel from those values. Doesn't always fit in, right? The market's going to do what the market does, but it might give you some ideas where there's support and resistance. Look how when it hit up here, it didn't really come down very strong, but it did eventually get down. This middle line held as support, and then it reversed. You can do it in an uptrend as well. Now, we don't have a great example. We have a really narrow example. I'm going to get rid of these drawing tools. Yes, I do. We'll try it again. This is Andrew's Pitchfork. And I'm going to use, this is very narrow, right? But it's an uptrend, a little bit of a pullback, and then a continuation. Well, it fell on the bottom end of it. Still continue to go up, but this is weakening. This tells me the market's not going up. Now, this is an extreme. This is a really steep ascent, but it can help guide you with where that resistance might happen until it falls out. So that's Andrew's Pitchfork. That's a little more advanced, but I've talked with traders who use it, and they the ones that use it a lot really like it. So that's more of an advanced tool. Now let's talk about snap mode real quick. Snap mode, it allows me, you can first of all not have some snap mode on. What that means is when I put on a drawing tool, it'll just go exactly where I click. If I do something like bar and price, and it might be hard to see on this recording or broadcast, I should say, but what should happen is it grabs the low, and it only allows you to click on a price and a bar, meaning I can't really get much lower. Notice how I'm trying to pull this down, and the second point is stopping at the low or at the high, wherever I'm drawing this, okay? So it'll always snap to a point that's on the bar, a price on the bar. The other ways you can do this is, let's look at snap mode again. Price. Well, let's do what I had. Let's do what I have, which is bar. So if I go back and I draw a new line, I can't click between bars. It has to attach to a bar. Now, it doesn't have to attach to the bar itself, but it has to be in the same vertical plane. So if I stretch this out and I try to go right between these two, notice how that point moved over to being above the bar. And if I try to go between these two bars, notice it grabs this bar. Even though it's not the same price, it can only be clicked on these bars. So I would recommend when you're trying to be exact, use bar and price, because that'll actually click on a price on a bar. So that's a mode, snap mode. It's kind of like some people they call it magnet mode, snap mode. snap to point, bar and price is really where it should be. So with that, I think we've gone through a lot. I would suggest if you see something else, explore. I didn't go through all the lines because extended line is just like array in two dimensions. Some of these other tools are a little more advanced, but worth looking into. By the way, one thing I neglected, I talked to Mike Burke before, text. Text is so crucial, I think, to journaling, and sometimes remembering what happened on a certain day or at a certain time of day. You know, we always like to think, oh, I'll remember what that is. And then we want to come back to it a couple days later, a week later, a month later, and I don't remember what it was. But with a text tool, you can draw that. So if I go to drawing tool, you'll see all the way down here, F12 is the hotkey. You can just start typing, this is where this thing happened, right? And now, if I click outside, that's fine. You know, I can move this around, combine it with an arrow. Oops. Now here's the thing. I have that point. This is where the snap mode gets me in trouble. I'm going to go to bar. We're going to try it again because I do want it to point to a bar somewhat, right? So I'm going to go to arrow line and I'm going to say, this is where that thing happened. And there we go. So combining two items is great. I can have text and I can have an arrow and I can highlight things and this will remain. I can also change the font. I can change the color. I can change the boldness. I can change the size. I can change the, like I said, the font, the style of font, really cool. And we can do all sorts of things with the text there. So text, very important, especially if you want to put notes on your chart. I want to thank Ed Jerkin for sitting in and monitoring the chat. Ed is a great, great teammate to do this. He's always helpful and great to work with him. Thank you, Ed. I want to thank Mission Control for allowing this this show to be going on. And we will finish the day. Mike Burke is going to take over the duty of closing the bars today, 3:15 Eastern. We'll see you at bars closing. In the meantime, have a great trading day.